Hello. This week, I'm back again with part two of a video idea that was suggested by Gary Buchan. I'm sorry again, mate, if I'm not pronouncing your name right. But this week, I'm going to take a look at some of the essential tools and consumables for getting into terrain making. Right, so thinking about tools for making terrain pieces. There's a variety of things out there, but again, you can start with just the basics. If you're looking to base things, you do get people that will still use, cardboard and toughen it out. I never have, because I want my pieces to last. I don't want them to be easily damaged. So I've always tended to go with an MDF as a base. But I have used sign writer's board for basing as well. But in terms of tools, I will flash up on the screen some of the different materials you can use. This is some of the insulation foam that I've been using, but I use blue foam, and you can even use ordinary polystyrene, but you've got to be a bit more precise with that because it breaks up so easily. But anyway, first thing you're going to need decent retractable knife, and it is worth getting one with a pack of blades if you can, because although this stuff's easy to cut, if you do slow, you can get a nice smooth cut. But it's surprising how quickly, when you're doing that, how soon this gets blunt, especially if you've used it for chamfering off the edges of your MDF boards as well. So it's nice to have a few blades, and I've just got a couple over time with these because someone's bought me one as a gift and I keep it. I use this one for smaller jobs because it's a smaller blade. When I'm doing big pieces, I tend to use this one. And like I say, relatively easy to cut through with one of these. So that is, I would say, the first essential if you're going to be making terrain and you're going to be using foam, is a decent retractable knife. Obviously, when you're getting down on some of the smaller bits, you can make use of the small craft knife. So there's a use for that one. So a couple of retractable knives and a small craft knife would be useful. Now, you're not always making things with foam. You're going to be using, you can use foam board, you could use balsa wood, you can use MDF itself, like the MDF kits that you get. And so sooner or later, you're going to find a good use for one of these saws, a craft saw. Now, when I bought this, I thought, oh, will I use it much? And I tell you what, again, pretty much like some of these basic tools, I use it all the time. So it is definitely worth getting one of these. They are a little bit more expensive. I think I paid about £7 or £8 for it, but you can pay a lot more. But these are a good all-round tool for working on terrain and anything that you make. I have even used this if I was, doing a real kit bash with a figure and I wanted to cut a figure in half and just get the top half of the body. This gives me accurate, neat cuts rather than trying to hack at it with a knife, because obviously it cuts both ways on the draw and the push, so you do tend to get a very neat cut with it. So I would put that as an essential for terrain work as well. Now, throw back to these. You've seen me using that, and I'm on one side and I'm keeping my hand well away from it. There's going to be other times when you're working close up, and when you're pulling through that, it's very easy to have a mistake, and I'll show you. I don't know whether you can see it. Can you see that there? I was cutting through a big piece of foam. I was in a bit of a rush. I was holding it, and I cut, and the knife went straight in here, and luckily it didn't get the main tendon for my thumb, but it, nevertheless, I had to have, I don't know how many stitches in it. And that was when I very first went back to doing this crafting about 5-6 years ago, and that made me realise that having a safety rule was a good idea, because you can place that on it and you're holding that and your fingers are above it, they're nowhere near. And I tell you, if ever you cut into your fingers or your hands with one of these, you're going to know it, because it is, you know, it's going to go straight through, and it did for me. So a safety rule, I would say, is an essential bit of kit if you're going to be doing any major terrain building. And again, there's variety of ones of these. You've got big ones if you're doing a massive job. They're not just good for the safety measure of it, they're great for you know, obviously getting accurate lines. Speaking of which, I suppose we've avoided one of the most obvious bits of kit, a green mat. Especially one that's got straight lines and angles that help you with the cut, so you can get accurate measurements. And the good thing about these is you can cut into them and they're self-sealing, and that's going to protect your table. So there, you know, very nearly overlooked, that is a crucial bit of kit, especially if you're working at your mum's dinner table or your wife's dinner table, because they won't thank you if it's got lots of little knife marks going through it. So yeah, a green mat, retractable knife, craft knife, saw, safety rule. Right, next thing you're going to be thinking about when you've built something is your glues. And again, we've touched on the glues before, but when it comes to terrain building, you want a good, strong, preferably 100% PVA that dries with a clear finish. That is another essential that you're going to need straight away if you want to do any terrain. The other thing that I quickly found that was really useful, and I started off with a small collection and I've now made it, you know, quite extensive, are little clamps, you know, because when you're putting two bits together, be it wood or whatever, and you want to be able to hold it while it dries, while you move on to the next thing, having a good range of clamps can make it so much easier. You know, if you're clamping something down to the wood, or if you're holding 3 pieces of wood together. So I've got these smaller ones, and then I've got these ones which are adjustable, and they work by, you just basically press a trigger and it'll bring them together. And then I've used them a lot on Sarissa kits, you know, like when you've got the the walls building together, and you're waiting for the glue to go off, and I put one of them on to hold it in place. And these come in a variety of sizes and shapes, and the beauty of these ones are that you can undo this piece and turn it round, and then instead of it coming together and trapping something that way, you can have it forcing out that way, which is fantastic, you know, for some jobs. And I went down our local like pound store, and I seen these bigger ones of the small ones, and they'd been reduced, so I thought, yeah, I'll have some of them, they'll come in handy. So that's my latest acquisition on my shopping trip. And the next thing is paintwork. Now with paints, I have used brushes that I've retired from figure painting, that you know, they're no longer precise enough. But then you want some of the bigger ones. Now, there's different routes you can go down with that. They're not a very, you know, special brush. They're not going to last forever, but they're a good workhorse. And at £2 for 5 of them, you know, I'm going to use these endlessly, you know, for pasting glue and all sorts. And providing you wash them out, pardon me, you'll have a reasonable life from them. You know, they'll last you quite a long while. But the beauty is, at 5 for £2, when it starts losing its usefulness, bin it. Because, you know, it's paid for itself. So, you know, they're it's an ideal way to get yourself started in, you know, painting with terrain, is to go and buy some cheap brushes. I got these from the works. But again, you'll find them in pound shops, dollar stores, you know, discount stores of all sorts. And speaking of that type of brush, I even get these ones that have obviously been made for kids. Now, you can see that these are cheap and nasty. I mean, look how many things are in there for £2. So, you know, am I going to use this to paint my figures? No. Am I going to use it for very long? Probably not. You know, probably 4 or 5 uses, and some of them might be spent. But they've got their uses. Like this one. If I've painted a, you know, a big piece of terrain like that, and I want to give it a coat of brown or grey or whatever, an ordinary decorating type brush is going to do that job, and that's going to last for ages. And what's it cost me? I mean, look, £2 for all of this. I mean, it's peanuts. You can't get it any cheaper. I don't need it to be a special brush. I don't need it to come from B&Q or any of the big DIY stores. I don't need to pay that kind of money because I don't need it to be that special. And even these ones, which initially when I bought them I thought, nah, I can't really see a use for them. They're just, I found they're ideal for stippling plaster onto something like the foam. They're ideal. And because they are like a nylon, they'll last forever doing it. I mean, I've used some of them to the nth degree. You know, and they're still around. I mean, I've got some in there now that yeah, here's one of them that I got a long while ago from one of these kits. And I have made literally dozens of scenery pieces using this to stipple on the plaster. So I would definitely recommend these as a cheap way to get into making terrain. And even these sponge things, I don't really remember seeing in one of my videos where I did like a tiger stripe effect of running watered down paints onto rock surfaces. and, you know, doing 3 different core colours and then overwashing it with black. These are ideal for dripping that watered down paint over rock surfaces that you're painting up. And again, you can use them over and over again. So they're ideal. So that's, I would definitely put cheap brushes down on the list of essentials for terrain building. I do use the files that we use for the figures. I've used them for, you know, shaping MDF boards and widening the sockets in some of the Sarissa builds. You know, they come in handy for that, you know, where the tabs go together on the buildings. I've used them for that. Right, other materials. When it comes to, put this to one side a bit, when it comes to fitting, say that was a rock onto the board, one thing I use a lot is decorator's cork, because once that's on there and it's bonded, it will not come off. I mean, you can use a strong PVA, but it doesn't grab it instantly, so you've got to leave it for a long while to dry out. And one thing, you know, you quickly realise, just putting a lot of glue down is just going to make it a longer job, and it's not going to stick any better. It's better for it to be a thin layer and just give it the time. But with this stuff, you know, I can use one of the cork guns, pump a drib on here, stick it down, and although yes, it's not dried or anything else, it is relatively quick, you know, and you can move on to the next stage. And you can also use it to fill gaps and edges around it, because this cork is paintable, so you know it's not going to get in the way of any paintwork that you've got to do or any scatter that you've got to put down. Now, you've probably seen me do this as well. Sorry about that. But the other good essential for terrain building when it comes to, you know, hills and rocks and things is ordinary filler, which is basically what you use to fix cracks in a wall. It's like a plaster and it's ready mixed. And what I do with that is I just put, you know, a couple of spoons of this into a pot, mix it with a bit of the PVA. You can even add colour at that stage if you want to. And if you look at this foam, if I push my thumb down, look, you can see how easy that I'm marking that up. And you imagine it, if that was a completed piece with paint and scatter on it and you knocked it. Well, what I do is I use one of these cheap brushes, PVA mixed with the wall filler, bit of water, and then stipple it on and go over the entire thing. You know, quite generous, but one of these pots is going to last you for, well, dozens and dozens of bits of scenery. And then when you leave that and it dries, it's got like a hard surface, so it's not so easy to press it down like that, and it gives you a nice firm, you know, surface to paint on, and it just makes these pieces a lot more durable then, you know, when it comes to making scenery with them, and they're going to stand the test of time to be played with then a lot more. So I would put that down as a basic, you know, a basic setup, you know, for laying down terrain. Some filler, some PVA and some cork, and you're not going to go far wrong with them. Right, let me get that tidied up and I'll show you the next thing for the terrain. Right, so when it comes to painting your finished bit, imagine this had all been stippled. Cheapest way to go, I bought a whole load of these Crafter's Choice paints, and they're quite cheap to pick up. You can, pick the colours that you're going to use the most, so you don't have to lay out a lot. And I think they were, well, when I bought them, because I've had these a fair while now, they were about £1 each, and they are a good acrylic. They've got a good strong mix. Not good enough for painting figures, but they're ideal for terrain. And you can get a variety of colours. I got these, I think, again through the works. But you'll pick them up at various places. But the brand, if ever you're looking for it, is Crafter's Choice. And as I say, they were about £1 a pot. So you can't really go wrong with that. And just pick the few colours you're going to use the most. Again, I got a deal, so I ended up with colours that I don't use very often. But in terms of scenery, like hills and stuff, it's going to be lots of browns and lots of greens and lots of greys. So they're the colours you can focus on getting. The other route you can go down, and I do this, and I still do it now when I get the chance, is I'll go in the DIY stores and they have tester pots. Now, I think they've got used to people buying the tester pots for modelling, because I'll tell you for why. When they first came on the scene, they were like £1 or around that price. And they were relatively cheap. But I've noticed now that they're going up and they're getting dearer. This is an old Wilco one, so you know how long ago that is. But what I did to get round that is I'd wait until they were looking to sell them off, and then you'd find them in their reduced baskets at 50p or less sometimes. So going in a local DIY store and looking for tester pots, particularly if they've been reduced. This is a really big tub, so originally they'd reduced it to £4.25, then they reduced it to £2, and then finally I found it in a 50p tub. And being an olive green, it was quite ideal. And even if the colour ain't exactly what you're looking for, if you pick up a white tester pot, you can start messing around with the shades and getting the colour that you do want. Because they're household paints, they are acrylic based. The one thing that keep an eye out for, but a lot of them are, is to make sure that they're actually matte, like it says on there, because you don't want a gloss paint. You want a matte paint for terrain building. So going in local DIYs when they're selling off tubs of paint and tester pots. Look at that green one, 50p. Can't go wrong, can you? A great big pot like that. So in terms of paint for terrain, you don't want to be using these. You don't want to be using your model specific paints. Look at the size of that. You know how much these are. Up to £4 or £5, some of them. Okay, £3.50 for others, but how much of a big terrain piece, and this isn't a big terrain piece, I'm talking that big. It's not cost effective to be using good paints like that on terrain. Cheaper the better, household paints. And you'll get by with it. So basically, that's what I'd call your essentials. The next thing for your terrain would obviously be your scatters and things that we covered for basing the figures. And you just pick out a selection of what you're looking for: stone, scatter grass, sawdust, scatter, or even static grass if you're looking for a special finish. And with your basic glue, you've got all you need. Anyway, I hope that's been of some use to you. It's only a rough guide. There are obviously a lot of other things that I haven't covered. There's different materials that you can build with. There's things like, paper mache, plaster work, or, you can use that modelling compound. Lots of things. And then for cutting the foam itself, you can have dedicated hot wire cutters. But I just wanted to give out the basics, really. Just, for people that are looking to just get into it. Anyway, as I say, hope it's been of use. If it has, please consider giving me a thumbs up, or maybe even subscribe and click that bell so you get notifications when the next video drops. Anyway, hopefully I'll see you again soon. Bye.